The celestial forum hummed with the quiet energy of 1,000 minds at work. Its crystalline spires stretched toward the void, their surfaces shimmering with the reflections of distant stars. Inside the grand amphitheater, the galaxy's greatest philosophers gathered, their forms as varied as their thoughts. Towering chitinous scholars, floating orbs of condensed plasma, beings of pure energy flickering between dimensions. Dr. Elias Carter adjusted the collar of his Federation robe, the only human in a sea of alien intellect. The fabric felt coarse against his skin, a stark contrast to the seamless biotech garments the others wore. He took his seat at the edge of the central dais, acutely aware of the glances thrown his way. Some curious, most dismissive. High Philosopher Veylun rose from his elevated platform, his forearms unfolding in a gesture of welcome. Bioluminescent patterns danced across his chitinous face, shifting from serene blue to the vibrant gold of authority. Esteemed colleagues. His voice resonated through the chamber, translated instantly by the forum's neural network. We convene for the Faith Galactic Symposium. Today, we examine the curious case of human ignorance. A ripple of amusement passed through the assembly. Elias kept his expression neutral, though his fingers tightened around the edge of his datapad. Scholar Krixis floated forward, their gelatinous body pulsing with faint iridescence. A fascinating topic, they hummed, their voice like liquid crystal, humanity's insistence on clinging to emotion as a foundation for understanding quaint, if not entirely tragic. Laughter, soft and condescending, echoed through the hall. Elias exhaled slowly, counting the seconds before responding. He had expected this. Dr. Carter, Veylun intoned, his glowing eyes settling on the human. As our sole representative of your species, perhaps you might enlighten us. How does humanity reconcile its limited perception with the pursuit of truth? Elias leaned forward, his chair creaking under his weight, another reminder of how little the forum had been designed for beings like him. Limited perception, he repeated, letting the words hang. Interesting phrasing. Tell me, High Philosopher, does a Zorathi see infrared? Veylun's bioluminescence flickered, caught off guard. Of course. And ultraviolet? Naturally. Elias nodded. Yet a Nelthari perceives the entire electromagnetic spectrum as a single continuum. Does that make you limited? Krixis pulsed angrily. A crude analogy. We speak of philosophical perception, not mere sensory input. Ah, Elias said, tapping his datapad. A hologram flickered to life above the dais. An ancient human text, its pages yellowed with age. Then let's discuss philosophy. This is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Written 2,000 years ago, he asked, what is this thing in itself? What is its nature? He paused. Sound familiar? A murmur ran through the crowd. The words bore striking resemblance to the foundational queries of Zorathi metaphysics. Veylun's mandibles twitched. Coincidence. All species eventually stumble upon basic questions. Or, Elias countered, perhaps we arrived at similar conclusions through different paths. You call it ignorance. We call it another way of seeing. Krixis drifted closer, tendrils rippling. And yet your species cannot even perceive quantum resonance fields. How can you claim to understand the universe when you are blind to its very fabric? Elias smirked. We built machines to see what our eyes cannot. Isn't that the essence of progress? The chamber fell silent. Then from the back, a rasping voice cut through the tension. Enough. All turned as Elder Xanthus, a being of woven light, unfolded from their meditation. This symposium was meant to study human thought, not mock it. Their voice carried the weight of millennia. Proceed with respect, or not at all. Veylun dipped his head in deference, though his bioluminescence darkened with irritation. Of course, Elder. Then let us proceed formally. He turned back to Elias. Dr. Carter, if humanity's philosophy holds merit, demonstrate it. Not with words, with proof. Elias met his gaze. Gladly. He tapped his datapad again. The hologram shifted, now showing the burning of the Library of Alexandria, flames consuming centuries of knowledge. You call us ignorant, he said, voice steady, but we learned from loss, from failure, from not knowing. He swept his hand through the image, scattering the flames. Your philosophies are perfect, unchanging ours. They adapt, they grow. For the first time in centuries, High Philosopher Veylun's bioluminescence flickered, uncertain. The chamber held its breath. The amphitheater hummed with the low-frequency vibrations of alien speech, a chorus of clicking mandibles and harmonic resonances that made Elias Carter's teeth ache. He sat on the lone human-sized bench, its adaptive polymers stiff and unyielding, either a design flaw or a deliberate slight. Around him, the galaxy's greatest minds lounged on floating platforms or coiled in zero-gravity perches, their forms as varied as their philosophies. Krixis drifted closer, translucent tendrils pulsing with amusement. Ah, the flesh thinker, they chimed, their voice a melody of condescension. Tell us, Dr. Carter, how does a species that cannot even perceive quantum resonance claim to understand the universe? Laughter rippled through the chamber. A six-eyed Gelian philosopher clacked its beak in agreement, while a serpentine vortex coiled tighter, its scales shimmering with mirth. The walls around them displayed intricate alien logic matrices, glowing fractals of absolute certainty, deliberate exclusions of human thought. Elias kept his expression neutral, fingers tapping the hidden datapad on his thigh. Perception isn't understanding, he said. Just because we don't see the same way doesn't mean we don't comprehend. High Philosopher Veylun loomed over the assembly, his forearms folded in a posture of patient superiority. Bioluminescent patterns shifted across his chitinous face, a display of polite skepticism, a bold claim. Yet your species' greatest works are, what, emotional treatises, stories? Stories are philosophy, Elias countered. You catalogue the universe. We interpret it. Krixis pulsed violet, disbelief. Interpretation without precision is chaos. Elias smirked. And precision without interpretation is sterility. The chamber buzzed. A Zorathi scholar near the back stiffened, his carapace flushing indigo offense. Veylun raised a hand, silencing the murmurs. Let us test this, he intoned. Present us with one human interpretation that rivals our axioms. Elias stood, the motion abrupt in the slow, deliberate space of the forum. He tapped his datapad, and the central hologram shifted, Earth's Library of Alexandria, engulfed in flames, scrolls curling to ash. You call us ignorant, he said, voice cutting through the sudden quiet. But ignorance implies a lack of knowledge. We lost knowledge, entire civilizations' worth, and rebuilt anyway. You stagnate in certainty. We evolve through doubt. Krixis flickered, tendrils recoiling. A tragedy, yes, but hardly profound. Isn't it? Elias zoomed the hologram to a single fragment of parchment surviving the flames, Archimedes' palimpsest. This was overwritten, buried, nearly lost forever. Yet we found it because we looked. He paused. Do you know what it contained? Silence. The foundations of calculus, 1,000 years before your perfect civilizations formalized it. Veylun's bioluminescence flickered, an involuntary ripple. No Zorathis light had wavered in debate for centuries. A Nelthari scholar near the front pulsed crimson. Coincidence? One discovery doesn't. Not one. Elias swiped the hologram. Da Vinci's flying machines. Tesla's notes, the Voyager golden record. We reach, he said, even when we don't know what we're reaching for. Krixis drifted back, tentacles knotting. This is anecdotal. Elias grinned, and your perfect logic predicted none of it. The chamber's ambient hum sharpened, discomfort. Alien eyes darted to Veylun, waiting for the High Philosopher's rebuttal. Instead, Veylun did something unprecedented. He hesitated. Elias seized the moment. You want proof, not axioms, not theory, action. He tapped his datapad again. I invoke a challenge of proof, gasps echoed. The challenge was rare. A live demonstration, not debate. Krixis pulsed violently. Absurd. The forum doesn't. Granted, Veylun said. His voice quieter than before. Elias exhaled. Now we play. The hologram shifted once more, this time to a live feed of the forum's energy grid. Observe, he said, human ignorance in motion. And then the alarms blared. The Vorac raiders had arrived. The chamber fell silent as Elias stood. His grey robe seemed dull against the shimmering bioluminescence of the scholars around him. 100 alien eyes tracked his movement, some with amusement, others with barely concealed disdain. You mock our ignorance, Elias said, his voice steady. Yet you've never tested it. High Philosopher Veylun's chitinous face rippled with blue patterns, a Zerathi sign of skepticism. Test it how, Dr. Carter? Your species lacks even basic quantum perception. Your philosophies are built on what gut feelings? Laughter echoed through the crystalline hall. Scholar Krixis pulsed with amusement, their gelatinous form undulating. Perhaps he wishes to debate emotion as a valid framework. How quaint. Elias didn't flinch. He reached into his robe and pulled out a small datapad. I invoke a challenge of proof under Federation Scholastic Code, Fei. The laughter died instantly. Veylun's forearms stiffened. That hasn't been invoked in 3 centuries. It is still valid, Elias said. I will demonstrate human philosophy in action. Not theory, not debate, action. A murmur spread through the chamber. The challenge of proof was a relic, an ancient tradition, allowing a scholar to prove their point through practical demonstration. Most considered it barbaric, uncivilized, perfect. Krixis floated closer, tendrils twitching. This should be entertaining. What primitive display do you intend, Softkin? Elias tapped his datapad. The chamber's central holographic projectors flickered to life. A massive image materialized, flames engulfing an ancient structure, scrolls turning to ash. The Library of Alexandria, Elias said. One of humanity's greatest repositories of knowledge burned, lost forever. Veylun's bioluminescence flickered yellow confusion. You showcase destruction as proof of wisdom. No, Elias said. I showcase loss. You sit here in your orbital palaces, your knowledge preserved for millennia. You've never lost anything. Never had to rebuild from ashes. The hologram shifted, images of human scientists, philosophers, artists. We learned from failure, from not knowing. Your perfect logic chains. They're stagnant. Ours. They adapt. Krixis pulsed angrily. Adaptation is not wisdom. It is desperation. Elias smirked. Then let's test that. He tapped his datapad again. The hologram dissolved, replaced by a live feed of the station's outer sensors. Alarms blared. A Vorac raider fleet had just dropped out of warp. The chamber erupted into chaos. Scholars scrambled, appendages flailing. Veylun's bioluminescence flashed red panic. Shields, activate the station rocked. A deafening explosion echoed through the hall. Lights flickered. Elias didn't move. Your perfect logic predicted this, didn't it? Krixis shrieked as another impact shook the station. We must evacuate. The survival probability is 0.03%, Elias finished. I heard. He strode toward the central console, shoving a spindly-armed scholar aside. His fingers flew over the controls. "What are you doing?" Veylun demanded. "Something illogical." Elias ripped open an access panel, exposing tangled energy conduits. He yanked 2 cables free, ignoring the sparks. The scholars gasped. Such crude manipulation was unthinkable. Another explosion. The ceiling groaned. Elias crossed the cables. The station's backup generators roared to life. Emergency shields flared weak, but enough. The Vorac's next volley bounced harmlessly off the flickering barrier. Silence. Elias turned, wiping soot from his face. "You call that ignorance?" Veylun stared. His bioluminescence dimmed. Not just shock, something deeper. Shame. Krixis floated weakly, their forms singed. You acted without calculation, without certainty," Elias said. "That's the difference. You wait for perfect answers, we make answers." The station shuddered again, but the shields held. Elias tossed the cables aside. "Now, who's ignorant?" The station alarm screamed to life with a sound like shattering glass. The crystalline spires of the celestial forum trembled as emergency lights bathed the chamber in pulsing red. Elias Carter's datapad clattered to the floor as the deck plates shook beneath him. "Breach detected," chimed the station AI, its voice calm against the chaos. "Vorac raiders in sectors 7 through 9, shields at 12%. High Philosopher Veylun's bioluminescent patterns flashed crimson, his 4 arms spreading wide. "Impossible." The probability of penetration was 0.03%. Elias finished, already moving. Around him, the galaxy's greatest minds stood frozen, their perfect logic circuits overloading at the impossibility unfolding around them. Scholar Krixis pulsed erratically, their jellyfish-like form contracting in distress. Elias grabbed Veylun's upper wrist. "Where is the manual shield control?" The Zorathi philosopher blinked, his chitinous face plates twitching. "Manual, the systems are automated." "Yeah, I got that." Elias shoved past a group of panicking Nelthari scholars, their translucent bodies quivering like disturbed water. Which way to engineering? A blast rocked the forum, sending a shower of crystalline shards from the ceiling. One sliced Elias' cheek. He wiped the blood away without breaking stride. Krixis floated after him, tentacles lashing. "Human, you cannot possibly override the damn doors." Elias barked at the nearest access panel. When it didn't respond, he drove his elbow through the crystalline surface. Sparks flew as he ripped out wires, twisted them together. The door hissed open. Behind him, Veylun's bioluminescence flickered in what might have been awe. That should not have worked. "Welcome to human problem-solving," Elias said, ducking into the smoke. Filled corridor, the acrid stench of burning circuits stung his nostrils. Somewhere ahead, metal groaned under stress. The station, AI continued its calm countdown. Shields failing in T-90 seconds. Elias sprinted down the shaking hallway, his boots slipping on scattered debris. The Vorac had chosen their moment perfectly, during the symposium's peak attendance, when the galaxy's brightest were gathered in one vulnerable place. He skidded into engineering to find 2 Zorathi technicians frozen before their consoles, their 4 hands hovering over controls they clearly didn't understand. The primary shield generator smoked from an overload, its crystalline matrix dark. "Move," Elias ordered, shoving between them. His fingers flew across the alien interface, pulling up systems he'd studied during late nights in the forum's archives. One technician made a distressed clicking sound. The backup matrix requires quantum synchronization across 12 dimensions. Without the central processor, Elias yanked open an access panel, revealing a nest of glowing cables. "You guys ever hear of a hard reset?" He grabbed 2 fistfuls of wiring and pulled. The entire station went dark for 3 heartbeats. There was only silence and the distant echo of explosions. Then emergency lights flickered on, and the shield generator hummed back to life at 50% power. Outside the viewport, A Vorac raider ship's plasma beam splashed harmlessly against the renewed barrier. The attacking vessel banked sharply, its spiked hull glinting ominously. Krixis floated into engineering, their body now a pale, sickly blue. You shut down the entire station. Bought us time, Elias said, already moving to the next console. His fingers danced across the controls, rerouting power from non-essential systems. Shields now at 68%. Not great, but another explosion rocked the station. The lights flickered again. The Vorac weren't retreating. Elias turned to the stunned philosophers crowding the doorway. "Anyone here know how to fire those defense turrets?" Veylun stepped forward, his bioluminescence pulsing steady blue for the first time since the attack began. "The targeting requires just point and shoot," Elias interrupted, dragging the towering alien to a weapons console. "Like this." He guided Veylun's upper hands to the controls. Left stick aims, right trigger fires. No calculations, no probabilities, just instinct. The Zorathi's faceplates flexed in what might have been a smile. Together they unleashed the Forum's defensive batteries. Outside, the Vorac raider ship took a direct hit to its engine array. For a moment it hung in space, its predatory silhouette backlit by the gas giant's swirling storms. Then it exploded in a silent fireball that washed the observation windows in orange light. The remaining attackers broke off, their formations scattering like startled birds. The station AI announced, "All hostile vessels retreating, shields holding at 59%. Elias slumped against the console, his hands shaking. Around him, the galaxy's greatest philosophers stared in stunned silence. Krixis pulsed slowly, their translucent body now a deep, thoughtful purple. Veylun looked down at his own hands, the hands that had just fired weapons without a single probability calculation. His bioluminescence dimmed to a subdued glow. We survived." "Yeah," Elias said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Sometimes you've got to stop thinking and just act." The Zorathi High Philosopher studied the human for a long moment. Then, with deliberate slowness, he bowed, a gesture never before offered to any species deemed lesser by the Federation. Outside, the gas giant's storms swirled on, indifferent to the philosophical revolution quietly unfolding in the damaged orbital station above. The alarms finally stopped wailing, leaving only the groans of twisted metal and the hiss of ruptured conduits. Smoke curled through the shattered remains of the Celestial Forum's grand amphitheater. The Vorac raiders had retreated, their attack blunted, not by the station's vaunted defense algorithms, but by a human's bare hands. Elias Carter leaned against a sparking console, his grey Federation robe streaked with soot and coolant. His knuckles were split from forcing open jammed doors, his shoulders aching from manually realigning power, relays the station AI had deemed irreparable. Around him, the galaxy's greatest philosophers staggered to their feet, their luminescent skins dulled by shock. High Philosopher Veylun was the first to speak. The Zorathi's 4 arms trembled as his bioluminescent patterns flickered erratically, a display Elias had never seen before. "Shame. You rerouted the shield matrix," Veylun said, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. "Through manual overrides, the system calculated a fey chance of success." Elias wiped blood from his brow. "Your systems assumed the Vorac would keep firing at the same frequency. They didn't account for human pattern recognition." He tapped his temple. "We noticed their guns cycled every fey seconds. Gave us a window." Scholar Krixis floated weakly nearby, half their translucent tentacles singed black. "Impossible," they pulsed. "No species reacts that quickly without precognitive instinct," Elias interrupted. He limped toward the center of the ruined chamber, boots crunching on broken crystal. "You spent centuries debating whether we were too ignorant to grasp quantum resonance or multidimensional ethics. But you never asked why humans question everything." He gestured to the smoldering wreckage. "Your perfect logic almost got you killed. Our flawed thinking saved you. A murmur rippled through the surviving scholars. A hulking Gronian philosopher, their stone, like hide cracked from debris, rumbled, "You acted without calculation, without certainty." Elias barked a laugh. "That's the point." He pulled a dented datapad from his robe, the same one Head tapped during the debate, and projected a flickering hologram. Sun Tzu's words glowed in the smoke. "In the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity." Veylun's bioluminescence dimmed further. "We dismissed this as primitive warmongering." "It's adaptation," Elias said. "You call it ignorance when we don't have answers. We call it curiosity." He swiped the hologram to another text. "Nietzsche, you must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star." Krixis pulsed weakly. "But chaos is inelegant." Elias turned to the jellyfish, like scholar. "And yet here we are, alive. Because while your elegant systems froze, I pried open a maintenance hatch and crossed wires your AI said shouldn't touch." He smirked. "Funny how often shouldn't and can't are just challenges in disguise." Silence. Then, with a sound like fracturing ice, Veylun did something no Zarathi high philosopher had ever done in recorded history. He bowed, all four arms pressed to his chest, his luminous face dipping toward the human. "Dr. Carter," he said, "the words thick, the forum owes you its existence, and I owe you an apology." Elias exhaled, suddenly aware of every bruise and burn. "Don't apologize. Learn." He gestured to the holograms now flickering with human texts beside alien ones. "You wanted proof our philosophy had value. We don't fear the unknown. We dive into it, because sometimes the illogical choice is the only one that works." The Gronian philosopher stared at the projection of Sun Tzu, then at his own cracked hands. "Perhaps," he rumbled, "we have been certain for too long." Elias nodded, then his knees buckled. Veylun lunged forward, catching the human before he hit the ground. "Medics," the Zarathi bellowed, his bioluminescence flaring bright for the first time in hours. Urgency, not shame. As the surviving scholars scrambled to help, Elias grinned up at the cracked dome of the amphitheater. Stars glittered through the smoke. "See," he muttered. "Now that's teamwork." Krixis pulsed faintly beside him. "Illogical," they murmured, but for the first time, it sounded like wonder. The great hall of the Celestial Forum lay in ruins. Smoke curled from shattered crystalline spires. Their once glorious glow now dimmed. The air smelled of scorched metal and ionized plasma. Scholar Krixis floated weakly near what remained of the central dais, their translucent body marred by blackened streaks where Vorac energy fire had grazed them. Their tentacles twitched in pain, the usual rhythmic pulsing of their bioluminescence reduced to faint, irregular flickers. High Philosopher Veylun stood motionless near the wreckage of the holographic projectors. His forearms hung limp at his sides, the intricate bioluminescent patterns across his chitinous face frozen in an unreadable display. For the first time in 3 centuries, the great Zarathi philosopher had no words. Elias Carter wiped soot from his brow with the sleeve of his torn Federation robe. His hands shook slightly from adrenaline as he checked the makeshift bypass he'd jury, rigged into the station's life support systems. The manual override panel hung open beside him, wires exposed where he'd hot-wired connections. The station's AI had declared impossible to realign during combat conditions. "You're injured." Krixis pulsed weakly, one tentacle gesturing toward the burn along Elias's forearm, where a conduit had exploded during his mad dash through collapsing corridors. Elias glanced at the wound and shrugged. "It'll heal." He turned to Veylun. "Shields are at 20%, but stable. Rescue shuttles from Zenthis Prime will be here within the hour." The chamber fell silent, except for the occasional groan of stressed metal. Alien philosophers from a dozen species sat or floated in various states of shock, their perfect logical frameworks shattered along with their station. Scholar Dralix, a crystalline being from the Rigel system, made a sound like breaking glass. Your actions were statistically impossible. The survival probability was fey-fey. Elias leaned against a half-melted console. Human histories written in fey-fey moments, Thermopylae, Rorke's Drift, the Apollo Fey mission. He gestured to the smoking ruins around them. This was Tuesday. Veylun's bioluminescence flickered erratically before settling into a slow, pulsing pattern none in the chamber had ever seen. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its usual resonance. We miscalculated. Krixis pulsed in agitation. But the equations were perfect. The tactical models. We're wrong, Veylun interrupted. His upper left hand twitched toward Elias in an aborted gesture, as was our assessment of human cognition. Elias picked his way through debris to stand before the towering Zorathi. You called it ignorance. We call it heuristic adaptation. When the map doesn't match the territory, we redraw the map. He tapped his temple. Or burn it and walk anyway. A tremor ran through Veylun's carapace. The philosophers nearby recoiled at the display. Zorathi didn't tremble. All these millennia, the High Philosopher said slowly, we believed wisdom lay in eliminating uncertainty. And we embraced it, Elias said. He gestured to the ruined projection systems. That is why I showed you the Library of Alexandria, our greatest repository of knowledge, burned to the ground. We learned that lesson 2,000 years before reaching the stars, that certainty is fragile. That is why we build redundancies in our thinking, not just our machines. Scholar Dralix emitted a high-pitched harmonic, but the inefficiency, the wasted energy maintaining multiple contradictory models. Elias grinned, though it looked more like a baring of teeth. You call it inefficiency, we call it survival. He pointed to the scorch marks along the walls. Your perfect systems failed because they couldn't imagine failure. Our primitive brains, we imagine failure, constantly plan for it, expect it. The chamber lights flickered as backup power fluctuated. In the unstable glow, the philosophers looked at each other, then at the human in their midst. Krixis floated lower, their tentacles curling inward. We owe you our lives. Elias shook his head. You don't owe me anything, but maybe stop calling us ignorant when we've been to hell and back a few thousand times before breakfast. He turned to survey the damage, then froze as a sound unlike any other echoed through the hall. Veylun's knee joints clicked as they bent. His carapace dipped forward. The entire chamber gasped as the High Philosopher of Zenthis Prime, who hadn't bowed to anyone in 4 centuries, lowered himself before a human. Your wisdom, Veylun said, the word seeming to pain him, is greater than we knew. Elias reached out, hesitated, then placed a hand on the Zorathi's shoulder. It is not wisdom, it is just being human. He looked around at the gathered scholars. The universe doesn't care about our models. It just is. Sometimes you have to stop calculating and just act. One by one, the surviving projection systems flickered back online. Instead of the usual alien logic matrices, the displays now showed a mix of human and alien philosophies side by side. Sun Tzu's Art of War beside Zorathi tactical axioms. Nietzsche is abyss gazing back at Nelthari infinity theorems. Carl Sagan's pale blue dot floating near Regelian cosmic harmony models. Krixis pulsed softly as they gazed at the displays. This changes everything. Elias smiled. That is the idea. He moved to help a wounded scholar stand. Now let's get you all to safety. The shuttles should. Alarms blared as the station shuddered. A voice crackled over the damaged comm system. Vorac ships returning. They've bypassed the perimeter. The philosophers froze again. their newly acquired uncertainty paralyzing them once more. Elias didn't hesitate. He was already moving toward the damaged control panel, shouting over his shoulder, "Summon, get me access to the station's power distribution, and find me anything that can conduct electricity. I don't care if it is a ceremonial staff or a dinner tray." As the scholars scrambled to obey, Veylun watched the human work with new eyes. The patterns across his face shifted into something no Zorathi had displayed in living memory, a pattern of respect. He turned to the others and spoke 4 words that would echo through the halls of philosophy for generations. Learn from the human. The rebuilt celestial forum hummed with new energy, its crystalline spires now interlaced with human-designed support structures. Where once the halls had projected only the cold logic of alien philosophies, now the holograms flickered with a blend of Earth's greatest thinkers alongside the galaxy's own. Elias Carter stood at the center of it all, his simple grey robe replaced by one edged in silver, the forum's new mark of respect. Around him, a mixed class of alien scholars and human exchange students sat in a semicircle. A young Zorathi, her bioluminescent markings pulsing with curiosity, raised a segmented hand. "Dr. Carter, your texts speak of the unexamined life, but how can examination exist without perfect data?" Elias smiled. "That's the point, Zayla. Perfection isn't the goal. The search is." Across the room, Krixis floated near the ceiling, their translucent body still bearing faint scars from the Vorac attack. They drifted lower, tentacles curling thoughtfully. "Your species embraces uncertainty. We called it weakness." "Funny," Elias said, tapping his datapad. A hologram flared to life, an ancient Earth image of explorers planting a flag on a windswept mountain. "Uncertainty is what got us here." High Philosopher Veylun entered, his 4 arms clasped behind his back. The once proud Zorathi moved differently now, slower, deliberate. He stopped beside Elias, his chitinous face tilting toward the human texts projected on the walls. "Sun Tzu's Art of War," he murmured. "You quoted him during the attack." "Instinct," Elias said. "You'd call it illogical." Veylun's bioluminescence flickered, not with amusement but something quieter respect. "We calculated survival odds at Fei. You acted anyway, and here we are." Elias gestured to the rebuilt forum, to the alien and human students debating side by side. A Nelthari scholar tentatively referenced Aristotle. A human student countered with Zorathi fluid. Logic, Krixis pulsed a soft blue, their version of a sigh. "We spent millennia perfecting our philosophies. You burned yours over and over, and yet you rebuilt." Elias nodded. "That's the secret. We're not afraid to be wrong, to start over." He tapped his datapad again. The holograms shifted, showing Earth's history, wars, renaissances, dark ages, leaps into space. "You called it ignorance. We call it learning." Silence settled over the room. Then slowly Veylun did something no Zorathi high philosopher had ever done in public. He bowed, not the shallow tilt of courtesy, but a deep, deliberate bend at the waist. The other aliens stirred, some mimicking the gesture, others too stunned to move. Elias blinked. "You don't have to." "Yes," Veylun said, straightening. "We do." He turned to the assembled students, his voice carrying through the chamber. "Today's lesson, human philosophy is not inferior. It is different, and in that difference we find strength." The room erupted in murmurs. A young human exchange student, barely out of her teens, raised a tentative hand. "So, what now?" Elias grinned. "Now we debate." He swept a hand toward the holograms, human and alien texts side by side. "Argue, question, make mistakes. That's how wisdom grows." Krixis drifted down to eye level, their tentacles curling in what might have been a smile. "Illogical." "Yep," Elias agreed, and as the first real debate of the new forum began, Humans and aliens clashing, learning, adapting, the holograms overhead, flickered with a single Earth phrase projected in 100 alien scripts. The universe is vast, but ignorance is not a flaw. It's the space left to learn. Outside the observation windows, the gas giant Zenthis Prime turned slowly, its storms swirling like the newfound thoughts in 1,000 minds below.